Hello, everybody. Welcome to the panel uh, at New Orleans Film Festival with the Undocumented Filmmakers Collective. My name is Wil Prada. Um, I wanted to start by talking a little bit about the Undocumented Filmmakers Collective and what we do, and also our panel. I don't know if you've read the log line. We're going to be talking about the barriers that filmmakers in our collective have faced and how to address those barriers, and specifically also as undocumented folks, uh, what what those barriers are too, and what we can do to overcome them. We started in 2018. The collective started with chats between folks in North Carolina and Los Angeles, online chats, and it was really a coming together of filmmakers who sometimes, being undocumented, being filmmakers of color, and knowing that in the industry there's not a lot of filmmakers of color, and also undocumented filmmakers. So it came out of a need for support, and also a need to address the way that um, undocumented folks are portrayed in the media as well. I think we there are many there's so much media created about immigrants nowadays, and we're always in front, oftentimes telling sad stories, and the tired narratives that are used. But because we're not behind the camera, a lot of times these messages are not authentic, and they're told from the perspective of folks that are not truly connected to our communities, and they don't often show the full humanity of who we are. So it's a big yeah. So over the last 2 years, we've been creating partnerships and collaborations with folks across the country, and with different organizations, institutions, collectives, and now we have folks across different states. We have over 30 members, and yeah, we're building. We're building. I'll read a little bit of the mission statement real quick. Building upon the media justice organizing of other undocumented leaders, the Undocumented Filmmakers Collective tackles the systemic inequities that undocumented immigrants face in the field of filmmaking by centering the expertise of undocumented people, not just as sources of stories, but more importantly, as creators, artists, and primary audiences. So now I'll just do intros. I'll start with myself. My name is Wil Prada, um, pronouns he, him. I am in Los Angeles, and as far as land acknowledgement, I'm in Tongvaland. Um, I'm a cinematographer. I also direct, but mainly I'm a cinematographer, and I started filming through basically organizing work. I was part of I got more involved in a group called Dream Team Los Angeles, and we would organize for well, first we were organizing for the Dream Act, the federal Dream Act, and then we were able to get the executive order granting us the work permits in 2012, and that's when I started to pick up a camera as being part of a media team, and also operating under that uh, mission of, like, telling our own stories, and so that was part of our motto as the media team, is don't depend on the media, but be the media. So the first thing I filmed was a free legal clinic we did for undocumented people that were hundreds of them were coming out of the shadows to apply for that work permit in 2012. And so I did like a 1.5 minute video with some folks from the team, and a friend from the team hooked me up with a bootleg Final Cut, and I was so amateur, like I put a little meme in the video. But now, you know, I've been filming for several years. As a cinematographer, I've come a long way. And in the festival, in the program, you'll also see my film Izel, which is a short about, I would call it like the genre of indigenous futurism. It's a short about a homeless teenager who builds a telescope and shares it with his community, and that's something very close to my heart. It's like a narrative doc, and yeah, you'll see it. It's a 5-minute short. And now, other, does Rahi or Dorian, would you like to introduce yourselves?
Sure. Thanks, Will. Hey, everyone. My name is Rahi Hassan. I use they, them pronouns. I am currently on the land of Occaneechi Band of Saponi and Saponi land, also known as Durham, North Carolina. Currently, I think a lot of the work that I do is consists of like cultural organizing. I'm also involved with various different efforts in story shift work. And I was also a Firelight Media Impact Producer Fellow. So one of the ways that I practice documentary is impact-centered storytelling through participatory filmmaking or community filmmaking or you know, leading impact campaigns for documentaries. And as part of a lot of cultural organizing work comes in through my job at the Center for Documentary Studies, where I'm a program coordinator for the Documentary Arts program. I also am involved with a local organization here called Migrant Roots Media. I'm on the board for that organization that uplifts stories that explore the root causes of migration. I would highly recommend checking that out. It's a digital platform. And also I'm involved with another organization called Dhaka Doc Lab based in Dhaka, where I'm from. And some of my work there is to really learn more about the South Asian filmmakers' struggles. And I was born in Bangladesh and lived there until I was 14 years old. Then I moved to New York City before moving to the South. So now currently living in the South and also being from Global South, there's, you know, having that like sort of finding that like bridge through that work a little bit. And a lot of my personal work is a lot of personal narratives that I feel like I started telling these stories mainly for my personal healing. So one of the films you will see that's being showcased here is called 30. And this was a short film that I worked on when I turned 30. And on the week of my 30-year-old birthday, I kind of took that week to go into kind of a meditative journey to reflect and do various types of rituals to kind of sort of shed a lot of things that I didn't want it to be part of my life anymore, and welcoming and celebrating the kind of spiritual rebirth that I was stepping into. So I hope you enjoyed that film, and excited to be here and talk more about some of the discussions that we'll have here. So I'll pass it on to Dorian.
Hello, everybody. I'm super excited to be here and to be in community with these wonderful group of people. I'm just super grateful to be here, and I'm also here in Durham, North Carolina, along with Rahi. I'm a documentarian in the sense that like I do a lot of audio documentary for the most part. I am yeah, I've been in this journey for a good 5 years, so I've been trying to figure out ways to just like as an immigrant myself, I've been trying to find ways to make it even more accessible to people like me, while understanding that being in the South also comes with certain limitations of that. But right now, some of the work that I'm doing is I'm, aside from being involved in the collective, I also happen to work at the Center for Documentary Studies as well, and I am a creative director for the Nuestro South podcast, which is a podcast that goes into into conversations regarding immigration in the South during the Jim Crow era, and we try to tie it into what that looks like and what that means today, mainly because the immigrant experience is not a monolith, and so we try to explore a lot of the nuances that come with that, and how many of our ancestors have tried to survive through the system while just going through this really big period of transition. And even more now, we're working on the second season right now, and you'll be able to find that in all audio platforms. And with that being said, so one of the pieces that you'll see throughout this showcase is actually a piece from a portion of one of the episodes that goes into a very specific person that happened to live in Georgia, and their experience also being a farm worker, and how being in the farm working field can be a challenge, especially for someone that's like coming from a completely different background, and just trying to get accustomed to how different life is here in the U.S.
Well, I think you're
All right. Thank you all for those great introductions, and let's get to some questions. So I wanted to ask first, what are some ways that BIPOC artists can be supported regionally, and especially particularly in the South? And that one is for Rahi.
Thanks. Yeah, that's something I think about a lot. One of the things that comes to mind, or I think about, is how some of the like art centers or creative spaces that I have been part of that have like completely like changed my life, and brought like some of the people that I cherish the most in my life I have met in those spaces, or like some of the most like inspiring conversations, or really sort of regenerative creative conversations I have had were in these kind of like art centers kind of spaces. And, I think about, even though it's kind of strange to talk about that during the pandemic where we can't really be in a physical space with, a lot of people, but I think the importance of having sort of like, I guess this is kind of like reimagining or imagining a space that I don't see a lot, especially in the South, or there's a scarcity of it. So, I think what I'm envisioning, it's kind of like a physical space that's safe and welcoming for everyone, whether, you're a BIPOC person or a queer person, or come from any marginalized communities, and also doesn't have like this sort of hierarchical like energy to it, where if you're not quote unquote a certain kind of artist, then this is not the space for you. That it's a creative space, and also like I'm not imagining kind of like coffee shops where you have to go buy something and be there, but more like you know, you could be potentially could be like a cooperative, workers run cooperative or something like that, where you can you know, just hang out, and there are like people come together, artists, local artists come together to build community in this space, and you know, share ideas, collaborate, and showcase their work, or it could even be a co-working space, something like that. And I think like, so I guess the next question would be like, how do we make that happen, or who is going to make that happen? I think there are a lot of like art galleries or a lot of like spaces that are somewhat dedicated for art practices. Especially I live in Durham, North Carolina, and I feel like in Durham downtown, there are a lot of art spaces, but they don't really feel as welcoming for, you know, yeah, BIPOC artists sometimes. And so I wanted to like also kind of just like reflecting on those spaces that I was sharing about that has changed my life. I was part of a collective called Durham Artist Movement in Durham, and we were able to like crowdfund, I think like a good amount of money to be able to rent a gallery space in downtown Durham for 6 months. And what that did, and it was this collective was like queer and BIPOC centered. And so queer and BIPOC artists in Durham came together and, you know, like utilize that space to build community. And just knowing that we have that physical space, so many of us would just kind of like, when we are having like, I don't know, writer's block or creative block, we would just like text each other and be like, hey, y'all, do you want to meet at the studio space and just hang out? And like, can I just talk through my ideas? And it would just like, you know, pick up coffee or drinks or something like that. And just, so I think, I guess what I'm advocating for here is that a space, like we need more spaces in the South that generate inspiration for artists, and also safe spaces that, you know, platforms where there needs to be like more and more spaces that like we feel safe to showcase our work. And so, yeah, at Durham Artist Movement, like, you know, we would put together a show every third Friday, which is like, you know, like open night for like all art galleries that have like a free access, like for a certain time. And that inspired me to like create work, knowing that my work will actually be showcased. There will be people coming to watch my, you know, see my work. So, and then I'm thinking about so many other places that I've been part of, like, there was another like place here called North Star Church of the Arts that was recently launched by some of the local artists and organizers. Well, it's the Freelon family that are based here in Durham. And what that did, it was also like, so they have a lot of, it's kind of a community space that you can rent out to host different events. And ever since that space got, you know, like was basically the leadership has changed by like BIPOC leaders in the area, it just opened up this whole new world for like BIPOC artists and activists to like kind of brainstorm like different events we can put together there. And we all look forward to like gathering in that space for different events and stuff like that. So some of the like, I guess, struggles that come up to make that happen sometimes is one of the main ones is gentrification, right? Like right now it's like, it's so difficult for BIPOC folks to even like I guess, get access to resources in various different ways, let alone like being able to collectively like own an art space, right? Or a studio space or a co-working space. And a lot of the times when like because of gentrification, like the culture of the neighborhoods that people have lived historically, and a lot of cultural art that exists in the neighborhood is shifting. And that's like very much affecting you know, the art culture, creative culture for BIPOC communities. So I think like part of me wants to kind of, as I think about the impact a physical, like, I don't actually have like a name for it, but a physical creative space could be a center that feels safe. Also, like, it's a whole nother conversation to think about, like, what does a safe space look like? You know, a physical safe space look like? But I guess like when I think,
I'll chime in a little bit.
yeah,
Oh,
no, go ahead,
oh,
Will.
I was gonna just chime in a little bit about yeah, gentrification. The how you mentioned that, you know, that's causing for less spaces to be available. And I'm in Boyle Heights. If y'all know, in recent years, Boyle Heights in Los Angeles has been getting gentrified, and rents keep going up. And it's, you know, for a long time, Boyle Heights has actually been like a place where there's a lot of artists, POC artists. Um, there's like murals all over our little city. And now with this incoming gentrification, what's been happening is it's been driving the rents up. And a lot of the spaces are like gallery spaces, and they get occupied by like affluent, often non-POC artists. And it brings, you know, it just, you know, for those kind of folks, like, they can afford to have like an empty space where they don't even use it that much. Whereas for like uh, the majority of folks in Boyle Heights who are low income immigrant workers, you know, they're struggling to keep their even their space where they live, not even necessarily like a space where they can do art, you know. So just like the, you know, just talking about the scarcity of those spaces. And then we've been over here. I was organizing with the folk while taking some pretty radical actions against gentrification. And I think some of it actually like deterred folks from coming in, and driving up prices. But yeah, those spaces are definitely like very scarce and all over the country. Yeah.
Yeah, and just so yeah, in terms of like regionally supporting artists, I would say, you know, invest in like art spaces. If you have like, whether, yeah, I mean, I don't have the answer to it, but I think like there is a lot of like community-led initiatives that we can do. But I just like think there is so much positive impact that a physical like creative space that can make in like enriching creative work for artists, especially that don't have access to spaces. And so, like, you know, I think about like community gardens that exist all over Durham. Like a lot of folks have like some additional land that they had donated for, and then it turned into like to the neighborhood association or something, and then it turned into like a community garden. So like, you know, if you are maybe if you're someone that has an empty space, empty gallery space, like you know, donate it to BIPOC artists leadership or something like that. But that's something to think about, you know, how like if there were more and more creative physical spaces that are safe and you know, welcoming for all artists from all communities, that yeah, it's, you're investing in your, like,
Yeah, because essentially you're
yeah,
like building more opportunities to create community is essentially is what you're doing when you have more space. And um, this also made me think about like my days at UCLA at Ideas. We were the on-campus group at the one of the first student groups of undocumented folks on a college campus. And and yeah, we had our little space in the student activity center, and it's just beyond, you know, even just, it's just a space for people to get to know each other. And extension of that was a space that we kind of like kind of uh kind of kept it within our group of undocumented students, which we call the cabin. And the cabin was just like basically an apartment that was rented outside of, like 2 blocks from campus. And it stayed basically it was like an undocu house. Like people would come in and out, and just through our networks or our friendships, our relationships with ourselves, that was like a place where folks could come and hang out. And so that was something we created, the undocu students created themselves, like, you know, taking some ownership of that space. And it's, you know, and it's hard to, it is definitely I think a lot easier to build community when you have those opportunities to be in community. And I know it's like more challenging now too with COVID and the pandemic, but yeah. So I go to our next question, and that is for Dorian. So I wanted to ask you about barriers, right? So you've been an undocumented artist in the South. What are some barriers that you have faced as an artist? And especially also, if you could talk a little bit about what those barriers are like in the middle of this pandemic.
Yeah, of course. I think that, well, being undocumented comes with a lot of um, comes with a lot of barriers in many different ways. But I think that if we're talking about in like, for example, in professional development opportunities, or even as a filmmaker, if you're trying to expand your knowledge in certain things, if you're trying to apply for a fellowship, or even if you're trying to apply for grants, you know, there are certain requirements that can sometimes limit those opportunities, and that can be limiting for undocumented artists, for example, and uh, will make it so that it excludes them from applying through different questions, right? So for example, in certain grants, right, you're asked to just kind of like pitch your project, right? But there are certain questions that come with it. Like, for example, there are certain grants that include citizenship questions, and that also comes with like a social security number requirement, and not everyone not everyone has a social security number. So from that moment, you're already excluding a portion of a community, and that being the undocumented community, because a lot of us don't have a social security number, and um, uh, that also yeah, like, it just ends up preventing a lot of artists from being able to expand uh, or just grow as an artist. And in that, I know that you had asked about what that kind of looks like in the middle of a pandemic, and especially as when the pandemic started, I think that a lot of not only organizations but also artists themselves started to realize what that was going to mean for them, you know, especially knowing that there were going to be a lot of economic hits for a lot of people. And so from that moment, I noticed that there were a lot of organizations that were all of a sudden like starting to pump out like COVID relief grants, right? So during when all of these grants started to appear, I think that a lot of things happened. So because everyone was in such a need for like financial support, it allowed competition to happen. And not only that, but there were very few grants that were actually that made, like, for example, some of our members even eligible to apply because they had those requirements of like those citizenship questions, the social security number questions. And from that moment on, like, you're also depriving a lot of artists from these opportunities, but also from just being able to survive, you know. And I think that going into the topic of like of competition, right? I think that can also be seen in a bigger way through these grants, right? Like, for example, with the grants that are that can be that an undocumented artist can be eligible for, it already, from that moment on, like, it makes it very limited because you're asking multiple people that have been excluded to apply, which then creates which then starts to create competition. And even the organizations themselves are the ones that are also creating that problem of scarcity in opportunities. So one of the things that I also have to think about while thinking about like scarcity of resources is how oftentimes, like, it makes me think about like charity versus solidarity, and how sometimes there's like certain nonprofits and institutions that do serve certain communities, but majority of the time they don't even reinvest in their own communities that they do serve, you know. And that makes the limitations of opportunities, even like the scarcity of opportunities, even higher, because you're not hiring the same people that you serve, right? But I'm curious to know, Wil, like, about like your experience. What have you had like any experiences with that?
Yeah, definitely. Like not nonprofits, institutions that will go and find artists from that are have no connection at all to the communities that these nonprofits serve. And these artists, they hire them, they pay them, sometimes they pay them pretty well. And um and it's the same thing that, it happens to undocu folks through what we mentioned earlier, like in the intro. This is something we're fighting, but it happens to, I think, a lot of marginalized communities. And because there are BIPOC artists everywhere, yo. Like, there should be no excuse to not hire or find these um, BIPOC artists that come from the communities that these people are representing, or trying to uplift, right? So yeah, that's definitely something that um, and specifically, actually, the our collective, along these lines. And if we segue like to the film industry, for example, the collective wrote a letter a while back, um, basically because we were tired of undocumented folks being our stories being told by people that are from our communities at all. And oftentimes these stories are just like poverty porn, and they're just repeated narratives that just don't show all of who we are. And in this letter that we crafted, it was to the uh, the creators of Living Undocumented. Is a Netflix show, and this show apparently told stories of undocumented immigrants, and so um, yeah, it's just one of those.
And when you mention like, having excuses, like I think that's a very common practice in extractive storytelling practices to use the excuse of like, oh, we don't know where the filmmakers from the community whose stories we're telling. They're in the community. But I think the physical space, like creative art spaces that we were talking about, it also like another impact that I wanted to just add to that the impact of having a physical creative space that's BIPOC led, or like, is a safe space for creatives from marginalized communities. The existence of that, or the establishment of that, is also like adds to like for folks to not be able to make an excuse when they're extracting stories and not including folks from the communities to tell their own stories. So yeah, I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, as long as there's been undocumented people in this country, there's an undocumented artist country. So and you can look at the history of undocumented folks making films, and you'll see that. And also lost my train of thought, sorry about that.
I mean, we are from the Undocumented Filmmakers Collective.
That's right. I guess one thing that I did want to add is that also just like the excuses portion also makes me think about how like not only like in the undocumented in the undocu creative spaces, but largely like in the BIPOC spaces where there have been excuses of like, oh, I can't find such and such for this type of film. I'm like, listen, like Brown Girls Doc Mafia has this like really long directory of just like super badass filmmakers, and so there's just no more excuses. That's um that's really the gist of it, you know.
Exactly. So typically we'd have questions, but I want to just wrap things up. And are y'all cool with that? Do y'all have any additional comments?
I don't think so.
I think we're almost out of time. So thank you for your attendance. And I wanted to invite you all to follow us at Undocu Filmmakers Collective on IG. You can also go to our linktree uh, .com/Undocu Filmmakers Collective. And you can find our the letter that I talked about to Years of Living Undocumented. You can find more of our social media pages through there. And also, I hope you all enjoy our films. And yeah, reach out to us. You'll be able to reach out to us through there as well. But thank you all for joining, and we also want to thank the New Orleans Film Festival for creating this space, and we hope to also keep this partnership going. And this is exactly what we're talking about, right? Creating the space for folks like us to be able to share our work and get more work and empower undocu folks across the country. So thank
Thank you
you
so
all.
much. I guess one last point. If you yourself are an undocumented filmmaker or know somebody that is an undocumented filmmaker and you'd like to join the collective, please reach out to us at undocufilmmakerscollective@gmail.com and we'll get in touch with you.
Yes, and I'll also just all the contact information, the social media, ways to get involved with us, ways to support us, all of that in the link tree. If you go to linktree.com, type in Undocufilmmakers, and you'll find us. Thank you all so much.
Thank you so much. Have a wonderful day.